Hey everyone, welcome to an epic journey with Lull Now. Today, we're diving into mysteries and thrills that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment to share your thoughts. Let's get started. The rain was a soft, persistent patter against the diner's grimy windows, blurring the world outside into a watercolor smear of gray and green. Haven, Washington, was the kind of town you drove through, not to. A place where the main street was a single stoplight and a handful of storefronts that hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. It was October 2025, and the air carried the sharp bite of autumn, laced with a damp, earthy scent of the nearby Cascade Mountains. Inside the Haven Diner, Nora Callahan sat alone in a vinyl booth, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. The laptop in front of her glowed faintly, its screen displaying a website for cabin rentals, the cursor hovering over a listing that read, Blackthorn Retreat, secluded cabin in the heart of the woods. Nora was 32, with dark auburn hair pulled into a messy bun and hazel eyes that carried a weariness beyond her years. She'd been a lawyer in Seattle, a rising star in a firm that handled high-profile corporate cases, until her life unraveled. Her ex-husband, David, had been her undoing, a charming real estate developer whose charisma masked a temper that turned violent behind closed doors. The final straw had come a year ago, when David's fists left Nora with a fractured rib and a restraining order. He was in prison now, serving a 3-year sentence, but the scars he'd left weren't just physical. Nightmares woke her at 3 a.m., his voice echoing in her head, promising he'd find her. Seattle, with its crowded streets and constant noise, had started to feel like a cage. She'd quit her job, sold her condo, and driven north, chasing the promise of silence, of a place where she could breathe again. The cabin listing was simple, almost too good to be true. A 1-bedroom log cabin, 3 miles deep in Blackthorn Woods, available for $50 a night. The photos showed a rustic structure with a sagging porch, surrounded by towering pines draped in moss. The description promised unparalleled solitude and a chance to reconnect with nature. Nora scrolled to the reviews, expecting the usual complaints about Wi-Fi or plumbing. But there was only one, posted by a user named Wanderer_47. The cabin is exactly as advertised, quiet, isolated, perfect. But the woods, they're not for everyone. Something's out there, and it knows when you arrive. Be careful what you bring with you. Nora frowned, her finger tapping the edge of the laptop. It was probably a gimmick, a way to spice up a boring rental with a touch of local legend. She'd seen similar tactics on Airbnb listings, hosts playing up haunted histories to attract thrill seekers. Still, the words lingered, pricking at the edges of her already frayed nerves. She glanced out the window, where the rain-slicked street reflected the diner's neon sign. Haven was the closest town to Blackthorn Woods, a 20-mile drive from the cabin, and she'd stopped here to stock up before heading into the wilderness. The idea of 4 days alone, with no one to answer to, no expectations, was intoxicating. She needed this. She needed to prove to herself she could still stand on her own. The diner's door jingled, and a man walked in, shaking rain from his flannel jacket. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scruffy beard, and eyes that scanned the room with quiet intensity. Nora pegged him as a local, someone who belonged to this town in a way she never would. He nodded to the waitress, a middle-aged woman with a perm and a name tag reading Darlene before sliding onto a stool at the counter. Nora returned to her laptop, clicking Book Now on the cabin listing. A confirmation email pinged her inbox, and she felt a small surge of relief. Step 1, done. She was halfway through typing a grocery list when Darlene's voice cut through the hum of the diner. "You're not heading to Blackthorn, are you, hun?" The waitress was leaning over the counter, wiping it down with a rag, her eyes fixed on Nora's laptop screen. Nora hesitated, surprised by the intrusion. "Yeah, I rented a cabin there for a few days," she said, keeping her tone neutral. "Just looking for some peace and quiet." Darlene's lips pursed, and she exchanged a glance with the man at the counter. He turned slightly, his gaze settling on Nora, steady and unreadable. "Blackthorn's quiet, all right," Darlene said, her voice low. "Too quiet, if you ask me. Folks don't go there for vacation. Hunters, maybe. But even they don't stay long." Nora forced a smile, brushing off the comment. "I'm not scared of a few trees. I just need a break from the city." The man at the counter spoke up, his voice rough but calm. "You rented the Marrow place, didn't you? Old cabin off the East Trail." Nora nodded, and he leaned back, folding his arms. "I'm Eli Whitaker. I know that trail. Been guiding hunters through Blackthorn for years. If you're set on going, I can get you there, but you might want to think twice. That forest, it's got a way of getting under your skin." Nora studied him, trying to gauge if he was serious or just playing up a local ghost story. Eli was older than her, maybe 40, with weathered hands and a faint scar running along his jawline. There was something grounded about him, but also guarded, like he was holding back more than he was saying. "Thanks for the offer," she said, "but I'm good. I've got GPS, and the directions seem straightforward." Eli's eyes narrowed slightly. "GPS don't work in Blackthorn. Too many trees, too much interference. You get turned around out there, you're on your own." He paused, then added, "Look, I'm not trying to scare you, just being honest. If you change your mind, I'm at the hardware store most days. Ask for me." Darlene chimed in, her tone softer now. "He's right, hun. Blackthorn's not like other woods. People go in, and sometimes they don't come out the same, or at all." Nora felt a flicker of unease, but she pushed it down. She'd spent the last year letting fear dictate her life. Fear of David, fear of her own shadow. She wasn't about to let a couple of small-town warnings derail her. "I appreciate the concern," she said, closing her laptop. "But I'll be fine. It's just a cabin, not a horror movie." Eli shrugged, turning back to his coffee. Darlene sighed and moved to refill another customer's mug. Nora paid her bill, grabbed her bag, and stepped out into the rain. The air was cold, sharp with the scent of pine and wet asphalt. Her rental car, a battered Subaru, was parked across the street, already streaked with mud from the drive up from Seattle. She tossed her bag into the back seat and slid behind the wheel, glancing at the diner one last time. Through the window, she saw Eli watching her, his expression unreadable. The drive to the local grocery store was short, just a block down Haven's main drag. The store was a relic, its sign faded, and shelves stocked with off-brand canned goods and dusty boxes of cereal. Nora grabbed a cart, moving through the aisles with purpose: canned soup, instant coffee, bread, peanut butter, a few apples, enough to last 4 days without needing to resupply. As she reached for a pack of batteries, she nearly bumped into Eli, who was standing at the end of the aisle, a box of shotgun shells in his hand. "Jesus," she muttered, startled, You following me now?" Eli raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Small town, only one store. You're the one who keeps showing up in my spots." He nodded at her cart. "Stocking up for Blackthorn, huh? Smart. Nearest store's 20 miles, and you don't want to be driving that road at night." Nora crossed her arms, feeling a mix of irritation and curiosity. "Okay, level with me. What's the deal with this forest? Everyone's acting like it's the Bermuda Triangle. Is it bears? Cougars? What?" Eli's smirk faded, and he set the shells in his basket. "It's not animals, not the kind you're thinking of." He hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. "Blackthorn's old. Older than this town, older than the people who built it. The tribes around here, they called it Tessala. Means the place that watches. They didn't hunt there, didn't build there. Said the woods had a spirit, something that didn't take kindly to trespassers." Nora rolled her eyes, but her pulse quickened. "A spirit? Come on, you don't strike me as the ghost story type." "I'm not," Eli said flatly. "But I've seen things in Blackthorn. Lights where there shouldn't be lights. Tracks that don't match any animal I know. And people. They go in looking for something. Peace, adventure, whatever. And they come out different. If they come out at all." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Last year, a hiker went missing. Found his pack 3 months later. Torn to shreds, but no body, no blood. Just gone." Nora swallowed, her throat dry. "And you think that's gonna scare me off?" "I think you're running from something," Eli said, his gaze steady. "And Blackthorn's not a place to hide. Whatever you're carrying, it'll find you there." The words hit harder than Nora expected, like a punch to the gut. She wanted to snap back, to tell him he didn't know her, but the weight of his stare stopped her. Instead, she grabbed the batteries and turned away. "Thanks for the heads up," she said, her voice tight. "I'll manage." At the checkout, the cashier, an older man with a face like crumpled leather, rang up her items in silence. As he handed her the receipt, he muttered, "You're staying at the Marrow cabin, ain't you?" Nora nodded, and he shook his head. "Keep the doors locked, and don't go wandering after dark." Nora left the store, the cashier's words echoing in her head. Back in her car, she pulled out her phone and opened the cabin's confirmation email, rereading the directions. "Take Route 17 north from Haven. Turn left at the unmarked dirt road, past mile marker 42. Follow the trail 3 miles to the cabin." Simple enough. She plugged the route into her GPS, ignoring the knot in her stomach, and started the engine. The road out of Haven was a winding ribbon of asphalt, flanked by fields that gave way to dense forest as she climbed into the Cascades. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the sky was a heavy slate-gray slab pressing down on the world below. Nora turned on the radio, hoping for a distraction, but all she got was static, punctuated by faint, garbled voices that faded as quickly as they came. She switched it off, the silence of the car somehow louder. Mile marker 42 appeared around a bend, a rusted metal sign barely visible through the mist. The dirt road was more of a rutted path, barely wide enough for her Subaru. She turned onto it, the car bouncing over rocks and puddles, and the forest closed in around her. The trees were massive, their trunks thick with moss, their branches forming a canopy that blocked out what little light remained. Nora's GPS flickered, the screen glitching before going blank. She cursed under her breath, pulling over to check her phone. No signal, no map, just the printed directions clutched in her hand. She drove on, the trail growing narrower, the forest denser. After what felt like an eternity, she spotted a wooden sign nailed to a tree, the word Marrow carved into it, an arrow pointing right. She followed the path, her tires crunching over gravel, until the cabin came into view. It was smaller than the photos suggested, its logs weathered to a dull gray, the porch sagging under years of neglect. A single window stared out at her, dark and empty, like an unblinking eye. Nora parked and stepped out, the air cold and heavy with the scent of wet pine. The silence was absolute. No birds, no wind, just the faint drip of water from the trees. She grabbed her bag and groceries, her boots sinking into the soft earth as she approached the cabin. The key was under the mat, as promised, and the door creaked open to reveal a dim, musty interior. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, flanked by a rickety table and a single bed with a threadbare quilt. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light, filtering through the window, and the air carried a faint, metallic tang Nora couldn't place. She set her bags down, locking the door behind her. The cabin was cold, but the fireplace looked functional, and she found a stack of dry logs in the corner. As she knelt to build a fire, she noticed something carved into the hearthstone, a crude symbol, like an eye with a slash through it. She traced it with her finger, a chill running down her spine. It was probably nothing, just vandalism or a quirky detail from the owner. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin was watching her, waiting. Nora stood, brushing her hands on her jeans, and unpacked her groceries. She plugged in a small electric kettle, relieved when it hummed to life, and made a cup of instant coffee. Sitting at the table, she opened her notebook, a habit she'd picked up in therapy. Write down your thoughts, ground yourself in the moment. She scribbled, Day 1. I'm here. The woods are quiet, maybe too quiet. But this is what I wanted, right? A chance to start over. The fire crackled to life, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Nora sipped her coffee, trying to focus on the warmth, the simplicity of the moment. But her mind kept drifting, to David's voice in her nightmares, to Eli's warning, to the review that said the woods knew when you arrived. She shook her head, forcing a laugh. Get a grip, Nora, she muttered. It's just a forest. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, and the forest was shrouded in a thin, creeping mist. Nora stepped onto the porch, wrapping her jacket tighter around her. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches tangled overhead, blocking the sky. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs. This was her chance to reclaim herself, to prove she wasn't broken. Whatever Haven's locals thought about Blackthorn Woods, she wasn't here to chase ghost stories. She was here to heal. But as she turned to go back inside, she heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound, like footsteps crunching through leaves, somewhere deep in the forest. She froze, straining to listen. The sound stopped, replaced by a low, almost imperceptible hum, like a voice just out of reach. Nora's heart pounded, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "Hello?" she called, her voice swallowed by the trees. No answer. Just silence, heavy and expectant, as if the woods were holding their breath. Nora stepped back inside, locking the door with a trembling hand. She told herself it was nothing. A deer, a branch, her imagination. But as she sat by the fire, the notebook open in her lap, she couldn't shake the feeling that something in Blackthorn Woods had noticed her arrival, and it was watching. The morning after Nora Callahan arrived in Haven, Washington, the sky was a bruised shade of gray, heavy with the promise of more rain. She woke in her motel room, a faded relic on the edge of town, with peeling wallpaper and a mattress that creaked with every movement, her body stiff from a night of restless sleep. The dreams had come again, as they always did, David's face looming over her, his voice a low growl promising he'd never let her go. But this time, the dream had shifted. Instead of their Seattle apartment, she'd been standing in a forest, surrounded by towering pines that seemed to lean in, their branches whispering her name. A figure had stood just out of sight, tall and thin, its eyes glowing like embers in the dark. She'd woken with a start, her heart pounding, the motel room's dim light barely enough to chase away the lingering dread. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her eyes, the memory of Eli Whitaker's warning echoing in her mind. Blackthorn's got a way of getting under your skin. She shook her head, trying to dispel the unease. She wasn't here to chase ghost stories or let small-town superstitions derail her. The cabin in Blackthorn Woods was her chance to reset, to prove she could stand on her own without fear dictating her every move. She glanced at her phone. 6:47 a.m. No new notifications, no signal. The isolation was already sinking in, and she hadn't even reached the forest yet. She dressed quickly, pulling on jeans, a thermal shirt, and a waterproof jacket, her movements deliberate, almost mechanical. Her bag was already packed, a few changes of clothes, a notebook, a flashlight, and the groceries she'd bought the day before. The only thing left was to decide whether to take Eli up on his offer to guide her to the cabin. Part of her wanted to go it alone, to prove she didn't need anyone's help. But his words about the GPS failing and the forest's disorienting nature had stuck with her. Blackthorn Woods wasn't just a patch of trees. It was a labyrinth, and she wasn't naive enough to think she could navigate it without a guide. By 7:30, Nora was back at the Haven Diner, the same booth by the window, a fresh cup of coffee steaming in her hands. The place was quieter than the day before, just a couple of truckers at the counter and Darlene bustling behind it, her perm bouncing as she refilled sugar shakers. Nora opened her notebook, jotting down a list of last-minute supplies, matches, a first aid kit, maybe a map if she could find one. She was halfway through the list when the door jingled, and Eli Whitaker walked in, his flannel jacket damp from the drizzle outside. He spotted her immediately, nodding as he slid into the booth across from her without asking. "Morning," he said, his voice gravelly, like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Figured you'd be here. You still set on Blackthorn?" Nora leaned back, studying him. Up close, she noticed the lines etched around his eyes, the kind that came from years of squinting into the sun or carrying burdens he didn't talk about. "Yeah," she said, keeping her tone even. "I'm going. Question is, are you still offering to play tour guide?" Eli's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "For a price. $200, cash. I'll get you to the cabin. Make sure you're settled. After that, you're on your own." 200? Nora raised an eyebrow. "That's steep for a 3-mile hike." "It's not the distance," Eli said, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. "It's the place. Blackthorn's not like other forests. You get lost in there, no one's coming to find you. Not me, not the sheriff, nobody. 200's cheap compared to what you're risking." Nora held his gaze, weighing her options. She had the money. Her savings from years at the law firm were more than enough, but the idea of relying on a stranger chafed at her. Still, the memory of her GPS glitching on the drive yesterday was fresh, and the thought of wandering aimlessly in a forest with no signal was less appealing than swallowing her pride. "Fine," she said, reaching into her bag for her wallet. "Half now, half when we get there." Eli nodded, taking the $100 bill she slid across the table. "Deal. Meet me at the hardware store in an hour. Bring everything you need. Once we're in, we're not coming back for forgotten toothpaste." Darlene appeared with a pot of coffee, refilling Nora's mug without asking. "You're taking her to Blackthorn," she said to Eli, her tone sharp. "Eli Whitaker, you know better than that." Eli shrugged, unfazed. "She's a grown woman, Darlene. Made her choice." Darlene turned to Nora, her eyes narrowing. "You listen to him, hun. Stay on the trail. Keep your wits about you. And if you see anything strange, don't go chasing it. Blackthorn's got a way of making you think you're seeing things you're not." Nora forced a smile, though the waitress's words sent a shiver down her spine. "I'll be careful. Thanks." Darlene shook her head and walked away, muttering something about "damn fools." Eli watched her go, then turned back to Nora. "She's not wrong. Blackthorn's tricky. You got any experience in the woods? Hiking, camping?" "Some," Nora said, which was half true. She'd done a few day hikes in college, mostly on well-marked trails in state parks. Nothing like a remote forest in the Cascades. "I can handle myself." Eli didn't look convinced, but he didn't press. "All right. Get your gear. Meet me at the store. And one more thing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather pouch, sliding it across the table. "Keep this on you." Nora opened the pouch, revealing a necklace made of twisted thorns and a single black feather. It was crude, almost primitive, but there was a strange weight to it, like it carried a story she didn't know. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up. "Something the old-timers around here swear by," Eli said. "They say it keeps the woods calm, call it insurance." Nora snorted, but she slipped the necklace into her pocket. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Eli stood, pulling his jacket tighter. 1 hour. Don't be late." The hardware store was a squat, cinder-block building at the end of Haven's main street, its windows plastered with faded posters for fishing gear and snow shovels. Nora parked her Subaru out front, the drizzle now a steady rain that soaked her jacket as she hauled her bag inside. The store smelled of sawdust and motor oil, its aisles crammed with everything from nails to propane tanks. Eli was waiting near the counter, talking to an older man in overalls who looked like he'd been born behind it. "Ready?" Eli asked, glancing at her bag. "That all you're bringing?" Nora nodded, patting the backpack slung over her shoulder. "Food, clothes, flashlight, knife. I'm not moving in, just staying a few days." Eli grunted, leading her to a corner of the store where camping supplies were stacked. "You'll need these," he said, tossing a pack of waterproof matches into her basket. "And this." He added a small first aid kit. "No hospitals out there. Cut yourself. You're patching it up alone." Nora didn't argue, though the growing pile of supplies was starting to feel like overkill. She grabbed a paper map of the Cascade region, hoping it might be more reliable than her GPS, and a cheap plastic poncho for the rain. At the counter, Eli picked up a small bag of rock salt, adding it to her purchases without explanation. "Salt?" Nora asked, raising an eyebrow. "Old habit," Eli said, his tone clipped. "Keeps things away." She didn't press, but the cashier, the man in overalls, gave her a long look as he rang up her items. "You're the one going to the Marrow cabin?" he said, not a question. "Heard you were in town. You watch yourself out there. Blackthorn's no place for city folk." Nora bristled at the term, but she kept her voice steady. "I'll be fine. Thanks for the concern." The man shook his head, handing her the receipt. "Ain't concern. It's a warning. Last fella who stayed at that cabin came back talking nonsense about lights in the trees. Ain't been right since." Eli cut in, his voice firm. "That's enough, Tom. She's got me to get her there." He turned to Nora. "Let's go." Outside, the rain had picked up, a cold, relentless curtain that turned the dirt parking lot into a slurry of mud. Nora followed Eli to his truck, a battered Ford pickup with a dented fender and a gun rack in the back. She tossed her bag into the bed, keeping her backpack with her as she climbed into the passenger seat. The cab smelled of leather and cigarette smoke, with a faint undercurrent of pine. Eli started the engine, the truck rumbling to life, and they pulled onto Route 17, heading north toward Blackthorn Woods. The road was a winding snake of asphalt, climbing into the Cascades through fields that gave way to dense forest. The trees grew taller, their trunks thick with moss, their branches forming a tunnel that swallowed the sky. Nora stared out the window, the rain streaking the glass, her reflection a ghostly overlay on the endless green. She thought about the necklace in her pocket, the thorn and feather design prickling at her curiosity. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "this spirit you mentioned yesterday, the one the tribes called, what was it, Tasala? What's the story there?" Eli kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. "Not much to tell. The Salish people who lived here before the settlers, they stayed clear of Blackthorn, said it was a place where the world was thin, where things from the other side could slip through. They called the spirit Tasala Quay, the Watcher. Not a god, not a demon, just something else. It didn't hunt unless you invited it, but it was always there, waiting." "Invited it how?" Nora asked, her voice quieter now. Eli glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "By bringing something dark with you. Fear, guilt, anger. The Watcher feeds on it. That's why I said Blackthorn's not a place to hide. Whatever you're running from, it'll smell it on you." Nora's stomach twisted, Eli's words hitting too close to home. She thought of David, of the nightmares that followed her like a shadow. "I'm not running," she lied, her voice sharper than she intended. "I just need a break." Eli didn't respond, but the silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken questions. They drove on, the road narrowing as it climbed higher into the mountains. After 20 minutes, Eli slowed, pointing to a rusted mile marker half hidden by weeds, 42. "This is it," he said, turning onto a dirt trail barely wide enough for the truck. The path was a mess of ruts and puddles, the tires churning through mud as the forest closed in around them. Nora gripped the door handle, the truck jostling over rocks. The trees were massive, their branches scraping the roof, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and decay. She spotted a wooden sign nailed to a trunk, the word Marrow carved into it, an arrow pointing deeper into the woods. "That's the cabin's name, right?" she asked. "Marrow. Who's it named after?" Eli's jaw tightened. Old family that used to own the land, built the cabin back in the 30s. They're gone now. Nobody knows what happened to them, but folks say they didn't leave Blackthorn willingly. Nora frowned, the unease creeping back. "Great, so I'm staying in a ghost cabin?" Eli didn't laugh. "Just keep the fire going and stay inside at night. You'll be fine." The trail ended at a small clearing, the cabin looming ahead like a relic from another time. It was smaller than Nora had expected. its logs weathered to a dull gray, the porch sagging under years of rain and neglect. The single window was dark, reflecting the forest like a mirror. Eli parked, cutting the engine, and the silence was immediate, oppressive, broken only by the faint drip of water from the trees. Nora stepped out, her boots sinking into the muddy earth. The air was cold, heavy with the scent of pine and something sharper, almost metallic. She grabbed her bag from the truck bed, slinging it over her shoulder as Eli led the way to the cabin. The porch creaked under their weight, the boards warped and splintered. Eli pulled a key from his pocket, unlocking the door with a rusty groan. Inside, the cabin was sparse, but functional. A stone fireplace, a wooden table with two mismatched chairs, a narrow bed pushed against one wall. Dust coated every surface, and the air was stale, tinged with that same metallic tang Nora had noticed outside. Eli checked the fireplace, ensuring the flue was clear, then pointed to a stack of logs in the corner. "That'll last you a few days," he said. "There's a creek about 100 yards west if you need water, but boil it first. No well, no plumbing." Nora nodded, setting her bag on the table. She pulled out the second $100 bill, handing it to Eli. "Thanks for the lift. You're off the hook now." Eli pocketed the money, but he didn't leave. Instead, he walked to the window, peering out at the forest. "I'll check the perimeter before I go. Make sure nothing's been messing around." "Messing around?" Nora asked, her tone half joking. "What, like bears?" Eli didn't answer, stepping outside without a word. Nora followed, curious despite herself. The clearing around the cabin was small, hemmed in by trees that seemed to press closer than they should. Eli circled the cabin, his eyes scanning the ground, the trunks, the underbrush. He stopped near the porch, crouching to examine something in the mud. "What is it?" Nora asked, joining him. Eli pointed to a set of tracks, deep elongated prints with claw-like marks at the tips. They were too large to be human, too precise to be an animal. "Not sure," he said, his voice low. "Could be a cougar, but doesn't look right. Stay sharp, okay?" Nora's pulse quickened, but she forced a shrug. "Probably just a big cat. I'll keep the door locked." Eli stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You do that. And one last thing." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small glass vial filled with coarse white grains. "Salt. Sprinkle it around the door and windows at night. Old trick my grandpa taught me." Nora took the vial, her skepticism warring with the growing knot in her stomach. "You're really selling this haunted forest thing, aren't you?" Eli's eyes met hers, steady and serious. "I'm not selling anything. I'm telling you how to stay alive. 4 days, Nora. Keep the fire going, stay inside after dark, and don't answer if you hear your name. I'll be back to check on you." He turned, heading for his truck, then paused. "And wear the necklace, just in case." Nora watched him go, the truck's engine fading into the distance until the forest swallowed it completely. She was alone now, the cabin her only shelter in a sea of trees. She stepped inside, locking the door behind her, and set to work unpacking. The groceries went on the table, the flashlight and knife within easy reach. She strung the thorn and feather necklace around her neck, telling herself it was just for laughs. But the weight of it felt oddly reassuring. The fire was her next priority. She stacked logs in the hearth, using the matches Eli had recommended, and soon a small blaze was crackling, casting warm light across the room. Nora sat on the bed, her notebook open, and wrote, "Day 1, afternoon. I'm here. Eli's gone, and it's just me in the woods. He's full of ghost stories, but I'm not buying it. This is my chance to start over. No David, no nightmares. Just me. The words felt hollow, even as she wrote them. The cabin was quiet, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, expectant, like the moment before a storm. Nora glanced at the window, the forest beyond a wall of shadow and mist. She thought of the tracks outside, the strange symbol on the hearthstone, the vial of salt in her pocket. She stood, sprinkling a thin line of salt along the windowsill, then the door, her hands trembling slightly. Just in case, she muttered, echoing Eli's words. As evening fell, the temperature dropped, the fire's warmth barely reaching the corners of the cabin. Nora boiled water for coffee, the kettle's hum a small comfort in the growing dark. She ate a simple dinner, peanut butter on bread, an apple, sitting at the table with her notebook open. The rain had started again, a soft patter against the roof, and the wind sighed through the trees, carrying faint, unplaceable sounds. A rustle, a snap, a low hum that might have been her imagination. She was halfway through her coffee when she heard it. A single, deliberate knock on the door. Her breath caught, her hand freezing on the mug. The knock came again, slow and heavy, followed by a third. Nora's heart pounded, her eyes locked on the door. "Eli?" she called, her voice trembling. "That you?" No answer. Just the rain, the wind, and the oppressive silence of Blackthorn Woods. Nora grabbed her knife, clutching it as she crept to the window, peering through the glass. The clearing was empty, the forest a wall of darkness beyond the fire's faint glow. She waited, listening, but the knocking didn't come again. Finally, she forced herself to open the door, just a crack, the knife ready in her hand. Nothing. No one. Just the rain-slicked porch and the endless trees. But as she started to close the door, her flashlight caught something on the ground, a small woven circle of thorns and black feathers, identical to the necklace around her neck. It sat in a puddle, untouched by the rain, as if it had been placed there moments ago. Nora slammed the door, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She locked it, double-checked the salt line, and backed away, the knife still in her hand. The cabin felt smaller now, the walls closing in, the fire's light too weak to push back the shadows. She sat by the hearth, staring at the door, the woven circle burning a hole in her mind. She wrote in her notebook, her handwriting shaky. Night 1. Someone, or something, knocked. There's a circle outside, like the necklace. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not imagining this. Blackthorn knows I'm here. The night stretched on. The rain a relentless drumbeat, the forest whispering secrets Nora wasn't ready to hear. She kept the fire burning, the knife within reach, and the necklace tight against her skin. Sleep was a distant hope, chased away by the memory of the knock, the circle, and the growing certainty that Blackthorn Woods was no ordinary forest. Whatever was out there, it had noticed her, and it was waiting. The first morning in the Blackthorn Woods cabin dawned gray and sullen, the kind of light that seemed to seep into the world rather than shine. Nora Callahan woke to the sound of rain tapping against the roof, a steady, insistent rhythm that matched the dull throb in her temples. She lay on the narrow bed, the threadbare quilt pulled tight around her, her eyes tracing the cracks in the cabin's wooden ceiling. Sleep had been a fleeting visitor, chased away by the memory of the knock on the door, the woven circle of thorns and feathers left on the porch, and the oppressive silence of the forest outside. Her knife, still clutched in her hand when she'd finally drifted off, now rested on the table beside her, its blade glinting in the dim light. Nora sat up, her breath visible in the chilly air. The fire in the hearth had burned low, reduced to a handful of glowing embers, and the cabin felt colder than it should, as if the night had left a residue that lingered in the walls. She glanced at the door, half expecting to see the woven circle somehow inside, but the salt line she'd sprinkled across the threshold was undisturbed. The memory of Eli Whitaker's instructions, keep the fire going, stay inside after dark, don't answer if you hear your name, felt less like superstition now and more like a lifeline. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, her boots hitting the floor with a soft thud. The cabin was small, its simplicity both comforting and claustrophobic. The stone fireplace, the rickety table, the single window that stared out at the forest like an unblinking eye. Nora's backpack sat on the table, her groceries neatly arranged beside it, a reminder of the normalcy she was trying to cling to. She reached for the thorn and feather necklace Eli had given her, now hanging from a nail on the wall, and slipped it around her neck. The weight of it was grounding, even if she didn't believe in its supposed protective powers. Just in case, she muttered, echoing Eli's words from yesterday. The kettle hummed as she boiled water for coffee, the sound a small rebellion against the forest's silence. She opened her notebook, flipping to the entry from last night. Night 1. Someone, or something, knocked. There's a circle outside, like the necklace. I don't know what's going on, but I'm not imagining this. Blackthorn knows I'm here. The words stared back at her, stark and unsteady, a confession of fear she hadn't meant to admit. She closed the notebook, pushing it aside, and focused on the task at hand. Surviving the day. Nora sipped her coffee, the bitterness grounding her, and decided to take stock of the cabin. She needed to feel in control, to make this place hers, even if just for a few days. She started with the fireplace, stacking fresh logs from the pile in the corner, the dry wood catching quickly and filling the room with warmth. Next, she checked the window, ensuring the latch was secure, and ran her fingers along the salt line, undisturbed but somehow less reassuring in the daylight. The cabin's interior was sparse, but she noticed details she'd missed yesterday. A faint scratch mark on the doorframe, like something had clawed at it. A rusty nail protruding from the wall, as if it had once held something heavy. And that strange symbol on the hearthstone, the slashed eye that seemed to watch her every move. She stepped outside, the air cold and damp, the forest shrouded in a thin mist that curled around the trees like smoke. The clearing around the cabin was small, hemmed in by pines that stood like sentinels, their branches tangled overhead. The woven circle was gone from the porch, washed away by the rain or taken by whatever had left it. Nora scanned the ground, looking for the tracks Eli had pointed out yesterday, but the mud was a churned mess, any evidence erased by the night's downpour. She took a deep breath, the scent of wet earth and pine filling her lungs, and tried to shake off the unease. This was her sanctuary, her chance to heal. She wasn't going to let a few strange noises ruin it. The day passed in a blur of small tasks. Nora swept the cabin's floor, the broom kicking up clouds of dust that made her cough. She organized her supplies, stacking cans of soup and packets of instant coffee on the table, and hung her spare clothes on a makeshift line by the fire to air out. She ventured a short distance from the cabin, following Eli's directions to the creek 100 yards west. The path was narrow, overgrown with ferns and slick with mud, the trees pressing close on either side. The The creek was a thin trickle, its banks choked with moss and smooth stones, the water clear but tinged with a faint reddish hue that might have been iron or something else. Nora filled a bottle, reminding herself to boil it, and hurried back, the forest's silence weighing on her like a physical presence. By afternoon, the rain had eased to a drizzle, and Nora decided to explore a bit farther, staying within sight of the cabin. She needed to feel the space, to prove to herself she wasn't trapped. She grabbed her flashlight and knife, tucking them into her jacket, and stepped into the clearing. The trees loomed taller than she'd realized, their trunks thick with lichen, their roots snaking across the ground like veins. She walked a slow circle around the cabin, her boots sinking into the soft earth, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. The forest was quiet, but it wasn't the peaceful quiet of a park or a trail. It was a held breath, a pause before something inevitable. She was halfway around the cabin when she found it. A tree, its bark stripped away in long vertical gouges, the wood beneath raw and weeping sap. The marks were high, too high for a bear or a cougar, and too precise, like they'd been carved with a blade. Nora's heart quickened, her fingers tightening on the knife in her pocket. She stepped closer, running her hand along the gouges, the wood slick under her touch. "What the hell?" she muttered, glancing around. The forest was still, the mist swirling lazily between the trees, but she felt it, a prickle at the back of her neck, the sense of being watched. She backed away, her eyes darting to the shadows, and that's when she saw it. A small pile of stones, arranged in a perfect circle at the base of the tree. Each stone was smooth, polished by time, and etched with a faint symbol, a spiral with a dot in the center, like an eye. Nora crouched, her breath shallow, and counted the stones. 7, evenly spaced as if placed with care. She reached out, hesitating, then picked one up. It was heavier than it looked, cold against her palm, and the symbol seemed to pulse under her thumb, though she told herself it was just her imagination. The snap of a branch made her jump, the stone slipping from her hand. She spun around, her flashlight sweeping the trees, but there was nothing, just the endless forest, the mist, the silence. "Get a grip," she whispered, her voice trembling. She pocketed the stone, telling herself it was just a curiosity, something to show Eli when he returned. But as she headed back to the cabin, the weight of the stone in her pocket felt like a tether, pulling her deeper into Blackthorn's secrets. Inside, Nora locked the door and stoked the fire, the flames casting flickering patterns on the walls. She set the stone on the table, next to her notebook, and opened to a new page. Day 2, afternoon, found gouges on a tree, like claw marks, and a circle of stones with weird symbols. I heard a branch snap, but nothing was there. I'm starting to think Eli wasn't exaggerating about this place. She paused, her pen hovering, then added, "I'm not scared, not yet, but I'm not stupid either." The rest of the day was a battle to stay grounded. Nora boiled water for soup, the canned chicken noodle a small comfort, and ate at the table, the stone staring at her like an accusation. She tried to read, a dog-eared paperback she'd brought, some legal thriller she'd picked up in Seattle, but the words blurred, her mind drifting to the forest, the marks, the circle. She thought of Eli's story about Tasala Quay, the Watcher, the spirit that fed on fear and guilt. She didn't believe in spirits, not really, but the idea of something out there, sensing her presence, her past, made her skin crawl. As evening fell, the cabin grew darker, the fire's light struggling to reach the corners. Nora checked the salt lines again, sprinkling a fresh layer for good measure, and hung the thorn and feather necklace back on the nail, its presence oddly reassuring. She was about to settle in for the night when she heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping, like footsteps circling the cabin. Her heart leapt, her hand grabbing the knife as she crept to the window. The clearing was empty, the forest a wall of shadow, but the thumping continued, slow and deliberate, moving from the front of the cabin to the side, then the back. Nora's breath came in the shallow gasps, her eyes locked on the window. "Who's there?" she called, her voice cracking. The thumping stopped, replaced by a faint scratching, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from the door now, a slow, deliberate scrape that made her teeth ache. She gripped the knife, her mind racing. It could be an animal, a raccoon, a branch caught in the wind, but the rhythm was too precise, too intentional. She edged towards the door, her flashlight in one hand, the knife in the other. The scratching paused, and for a moment the silence was worse than the noise. Then a voice, low, guttural, barely audible, whispered her name. "Nora." It was faint, carried on the wind, but unmistakable. Her blood ran cold, Eli's warning ringing in her ears. "Don't answer if you hear your name." She backed away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The whisper came again, louder this time, closer, as if the speaker was right outside the door. "Nora, come out." The voice was wrong, not human, a distorted mimicry that twisted her name into something alien. She pressed herself against the wall, the knife trembling in her hand, and waited, counting the seconds, praying for the sound to stop. It did, eventually, fading into the rain and the wind. Nora didn't move, didn't breathe, until the fire's crackle was the only sound left. She slid to the floor, her back against the wall, the knife still clutched to her chest. The cabin felt smaller now, the air thicker, as if the forest had seeped inside. She crawled to the table, grabbing her notebook, and wrote, her hand shaking. Night 2. It said, "My name." I heard it, clear as day. I didn't answer, but it knows I'm here. What the hell is out there? Sleep was impossible after that. Nora kept the fire burning, feeding it logs until her arms ached, the flames her only defense against the darkness. She sat by the hearth, the knife in her lap, the stone on the table glinting in the firelight. The forest was silent now, but it was a liar's silence, hiding something just out of reach. She thought of the gouges, the stones, the voice, and a single terrifying question took root. What if Blackthorn Woods wasn't just a place? What if it was alive? The night stretched on, endless and merciless, the rain a relentless drumbeat against the roof. Nora stayed awake, her eyes fixed on the door, the window, the shadows that danced on the walls. She didn't know what was out there, but she knew one thing for certain. Blackthorn Woods was watching her, and it was getting closer. The third day in Blackthorn Woods broke with a stillness that felt wrong, as if the forest had inhaled and forgotten to exhale. Nora Callahan woke on the cabin floor, her back aching from where she'd slumped against the wall, the knife still clutched in her hand. The fire in the hearth was a faint glow, barely enough to warm the room, and the air was thick with the scent of ash and something sharper, like rusted iron. Her notebook lay open on the table, the words from last night scrawled in a trembling hand. Night 2. It said, "My name." I heard it, clear as day. I didn't answer, but it knows I'm here. What the hell is out there? The memory of the voice, low, guttural, twisting her name into something alien, sent a shiver through her. She hadn't slept after that. Not really. just drifted in and out of a haze where the line between dream and reality blurred. Nora stood, her joints protesting, and stoked the fire, the crackle of fresh logs a small comfort. The cabin felt smaller today, the walls pressing in, the single window a portal to a world that no longer felt safe. She checked the salt lines at the door and window, undisturbed but somehow less potent, as if the forest had found a way to seep through her defenses. The thorn and feather necklace hung around her neck, its weight a constant reminder of Eli Whitaker's warning. Keep it on you. It keeps the woods calm. She didn't believe in charms, not entirely, but she wasn't ready to test her luck by taking it off. The stone she'd found yesterday, the one with the spiral eye symbol, sat on the table, glinting in the firelight. She'd meant to leave it outside, but something about it had compelled her to bring it in, like it belonged here, with her. Now, staring at it, she felt a pang of regret. The gouges on the tree, the circle of stones, the voice calling her name. None of it was random. Blackthorn Woods wasn't just a forest. It was a presence, and it was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. Nora boiled water for coffee, the kettle's hum a fleeting anchor to normalcy. She ate a granola bar, the taste bland and mechanical, and opened her notebook to a new page. Day 3, morning. I heard it last night. My name, over and over, like it was taunting me. The cabin feels wrong today, like it's part of the forest now. I need to get out, clear my head. But I'm scared to leave. What if it's waiting? She paused, her pen hovering, then added, I'm not crazy. This is real, and I'm not letting it win. The plan was simple. Stay close to the cabin, explore just enough to feel in control, and wait for Eli to return tomorrow. He'd promised to check on her after 4 days, and though she hated relying on anyone, the thought of his truck pulling into the clearing was a lifeline. But staying inside, trapped with her thoughts, and the cabin's oppressive silence, was starting to feel like surrender. She needed to move, to prove to herself she wasn't a prisoner. Nora grabbed her flashlight, knife, and the vial of salt Eli had given her, tucking them into her jacket. She hesitated at the door, her hand on the lock, the memory of the voice still fresh. You're not scared, she muttered, forcing herself to turn the knob. The porch creaked under her boots, the air cold and damp, the forest shrouded in a mist that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The clearing was empty, the trees standing like silent judges, their branches tangled overhead. She scanned the ground for signs of last night's visitor. No tracks, no woven circles, just mud and pine needles churned by the rain. She started with a short walk, staying within sight of the cabin, her eyes darting to every shadow, every rustle. The forest was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that hid things, like a predator holding its breath. She found the tree with the gouges again, the marks even deeper now, the sap darker, almost black. The circle of stones was gone, as if it had never been there, but the ground where they'd sat was scorched, a faint spiral pattern burned into the earth. Nora's stomach twisted, her fingers tightening on the knife. This isn't right, she whispered, backing away. She was about to head back when she heard it, a low, rhythmic hum, like a chant carried on the wind. It was faint, coming from deeper in the forest, but it stirred something in her, a mix of fear and curiosity. Against her better judgment, she followed the sound, moving slowly, her flashlight sweeping the path. The trees grew denser, their trunks closer, their roots snaking across the ground like traps. The hum grew louder, more distinct, and Nora realized it wasn't a chant, but a word, repeated over and over, her name. Nora. Nora, Nora. She froze, her heart hammering, the flashlight trembling in her hand. The voice was the same as last night, guttural and wrong, but closer now, as if it were just beyond the next tree. She spun around, expecting to see someone, something, standing there. But the forest was empty, the mist swirling like a living thing. "Leave me alone," she shouted, her voice cracking. The hum stopped, replaced by a single heavy thud, like a footstep on wet earth. Nora ran, her boots slipping in the mud, branches clawing at her jacket. She didn't look back, didn't dare, Eli's warning echoing in her mind. Don't go chasing anything strange. The cabin came into view, a beacon in the mist, and she stumbled onto the porch, slamming the door behind her. She locked it, her hands shaking, and pressed her back against the wood, gasping for breath. The forest was silent again, but the silence was a lie, hiding whatever had called her name. Inside, Nora sank to the floor, the knife still in her hand. The fire had gone out, the cabin colder than before, the air heavy with that metallic tang. She crawled to the hearth, rebuilding the fire with trembling hands, the flames her only defense against the growing dark. She sprinkled fresh salt across the door and window, the grains scattering like ash, and checked the thorn and feather necklace, still secure around her neck. "You're okay?" she whispered, though the words felt hollow. "It's just your head messing with you." But it wasn't. The stone on the table seemed to pulse in the firelight, its spiral eye symbol clearer now, almost glowing. Nora stared at it, a sick feeling rising in her chest. She grabbed her notebook, writing frantically, "Day 3, afternoon." It called my name again, out in the woods. I ran, but I think it wanted me to follow. The stone's doing something. I can feel it. I need to get rid of it. But I'm scared to touch it. She was about to throw the stone into the fire when a new sound stopped her. A slow, deliberate scraping, like claws dragging across the cabin's exterior. It started at the back wall, moving toward the window, then the door, a methodical circuit that made her skin crawl. Nora gripped the knife, her eyes locked on the window, where the mist pressed against the glass like a living thing. The scraping paused, and then with a sudden violent crash, something heavy slammed against the door. Nora screamed, scrambling to her feet, the knife raised. The door shook, the lock rattling. But it held. The slam came again, harder, the wood groaning under the force. "Get away!" she shouted, her voice raw. The noise stopped, replaced by that same guttural whisper, now right outside the door. "Nora, let me in." She backed away, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. The whisper grew louder, more insistent, a chorus of voices now, overlapping, twisting her name into a cacophony. "Nora, Nora, open the door." She pressed her hands to her ears, the knife clattering to the floor, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside her head, slithering through her thoughts, pulling at memories she'd buried deep. She saw David, his face contorted with rage, his fist raised. She saw the Seattle apartment, the blood on the floor, her own screams echoing. And then something else. A figure, tall and thin, cloaked in shadow, its eyes burning red, standing in the corner of the room. Nora blinked and it was gone, but the voices remained, relentless, hungry. "You brought me here," they hissed. "You can't run." Nora stumbled to the table, grabbing the vial of salt and pouring it in a frantic circle around herself. The voices faltered, the air growing still, and she sank to her knees, sobbing, the salt crunching under her. The cabin was silent again, but the silence was a predator, waiting for her to let her guard down. She crawled to the fire, feeding it every log she had, the flames roaring to life, casting long twitching shadows on the walls. That's when she saw it. Through the window, just beyond the clearing, a shape in the mist. It was tall, impossibly so, its limbs bent at wrong angles, its head cocked like a bird's. Its eyes glowed, twin points of red that pierced the fog, locking onto her. Nora froze, her breath catching, the knife forgotten on the floor. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, its presence a weight that crushed the air from her lungs. She didn't know how long she stared, seconds or minutes, but when she finally blinked, it was gone. The mist swirled where it had stood, the forest silent once more. Nora scrambled to the window, slamming the shutters closed, her hands trembling so badly she could barely work the latch. She sank to the floor, pulling her knees to her chest, the fire's heat doing nothing to chase away the cold that had settled in her bones. She wrote in her notebook, her handwriting barely legible. Night 3. It's here. I saw it. Tall, red eyes, watching me. It tried to get in, but the salt stopped it, I think. I can't stay here, but I can't leave. Eli, where are you? She paused, then added, it knows my name. It knows my past. It's not just a spirit. It's Tsalakwe, and it wants me. The rest of the night was a blur of fear and exhaustion. Nora stayed by the fire, the knife back in her hand, her eyes darting to every creak, every shadow. The voices didn't return, but the sense of being watched never left. She thought of the stone, the gouges, the woven circle, and a terrifying truth took shape. Blackthorn Woods wasn't just hunting her. It was claiming her, piece by piece, and she didn't know how to fight back. The fourth morning in Blackthorn Woods was a pale imitation of dawn, the sky a slab of gray that barely lightened the forest. Nora Callahan woke to the sound of her own ragged breathing, her body curled in a ball by the hearth, the fire reduced to a few smoldering coals. The knife was still in her hand, her knuckles white from gripping it through the night. The cabin was cold, the air thick with the metallic tang that had haunted her since she arrived. Her notebook lay open on the floor, the last entry a desperate scrawl. Night 3. It's here. I saw it. Tall, red eyes, watching me. It tried to get in, but the salt stopped it, I think. I can't stay here, but I can't leave. Eli, where are you? It knows my name. It knows my past. It's not just a spirit. It's Tsalakwe, and it wants me. Nora's eyes burned, her body aching from lack of sleep, but fear kept her moving. She stood, her legs unsteady, and rebuilt the fire, the flames a flickering defense against the darkness that seemed to seep through the walls. The stone with the spiralized symbol still sat on the table, its presence a silent accusation. She wanted to throw it out, to burn it, but something stopped her, a feeling that it was tied to whatever was out there, that destroying it might make things worse. She checked the salt lines, now scattered from her frantic movements last night, and poured fresh grains across the door and window. The thorn and feather necklace hung heavy around her neck, its crude design a reminder of Eli's warning, it keeps the woods calm. But the woods were anything but calm. The figure she'd seen last night, Tsalakwe, the Watcher, had been real, its red eyes burning into her soul. It wasn't just a story, not anymore. It was here, and it wanted her. Nora boiled water for coffee, the routine a fragile thread to sanity. She ate another granola bar, forcing it down despite the nausea churning in her gut, and opened her notebook. Day 4, morning. I saw it. Tsalakwe. It's not human, not animal. It's something else, and it's after me. I need to get out. But the forest, it's like it's alive. changing around me. Eli's coming today. I just have to hold on." She paused, her pen trembling, then added, "I'm scared. More than I've ever been. But I'm not giving up." The plan was to wait for Eli, to stay barricaded in the cabin until his truck pulled into the clearing. But the thought of another day trapped inside, with the Watcher's eyes haunting her, was unbearable. She needed to do something, to take control, even if it meant risking the forest. She decided to try finding the trail back to the road, to mark a path for Eli to follow. If she could make it even halfway, she'd feel less like a prisoner. Nora packed her backpack, flashlight, knife, the vial of salt, a bottle of creek water, and a spare jacket. She hesitated over the stone, then shoved it into her pocket, its weight a reluctant companion. She stepped onto the porch, the air cold and heavy, the mist thicker than ever, curling around the trees like a living thing. The clearing was empty, but the forest felt different today, more alive, its silence a predator's crouch. She sprinkled salt around the porch, a final barrier, and started walking, her flashlight cutting through the fog. The trail she and Eli had taken was gone, the path swallowed by undergrowth, the trees standing closer than she remembered. Her map was useless, the landmarks blurred by mist, and her compass spun wildly, refusing to settle. Nora's heart pounded, but she pressed on, following the faint sound of the creek, hoping it would lead her to the road. The forest seemed to shift around her, branches snapping where no one walked, shadows flickering at the edge of her vision. She gripped the knife, her eyes darting to every rustle, every whisper of wind. She was a mile from the cabin when she found it, a clearing, unnatural in its perfection, the ground bare except for a single tree in the center. The tree was dead, its bark black and peeling, its branches twisted like claws. At its base was a pile of bones, small, delicate, like those of birds or rodents, arranged in a spiral that mirrored the symbol on the stone. Nora's breath caught, her hand tightening on the knife. The air here was wrong, heavy with a pressure that made her ears pop, and the mist seemed to pulse, forming shapes that dissolved when she looked directly at them. She was about to turn back when the hum started again, the same chant-like sound from yesterday, now louder, more insistent. "Nora, Nora, come closer." The voice was everywhere, in the trees, in the ground, in her head. She spun around, her flashlight sweeping the clearing, and there it was, Tasala Quay, standing at the edge of the mist, its tall, thin frame cloaked in shadow, its red eyes burning through the fog. Its head was cocked, its limbs bent at angles that defied nature, and it moved with a slow, deliberate grace, like a spider stalking prey. Nora screamed, stumbling backward, the knife raised. "Stay away!" she shouted, her voice swallowed by the forest. The Watcher didn't move, didn't blink, just watched, its eyes boring into her. She fumbled for the vial of salt, pouring it in a frantic arc between her and the figure. The Watcher hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pipe, and recoiled, its form flickering like a bad signal. Nora ran, her boots pounding the earth, the hum chasing her, growing louder, more desperate. The forest seemed to fight her, roots tripping her, branches clawing at her face. She lost the trail, the creek, everything, the mist closing in like a cage. Her flashlight flickered, the beam weakening, and she realized with a sickening jolt that she was lost. The hum was a roar now, her name a relentless drumbeat. "Nora, Nora, you can't run." She fell, her knees hitting the mud, and the stone slipped from her pocket, landing in a puddle. Its spiral eye symbol glowed, faint but unmistakable, and the ground beneath her seemed to pulse in time with it. Nora scrambled to her feet, grabbing the stone, and that's when she heard it. A human voice, faint but real, calling her name. "Nora, where are you?" It was Eli, somewhere in the mist. She shouted back, her voice hoarse, and ran toward the sound, the Watcher's hum fading, but never stopping. She broke through a line of trees and saw him. Eli, his flannel jacket torn, blood streaming from a gash on his arm, his face pale but determined. "Nora, thank God," he gasped, grabbing her arm. "We gotta move. It's close." "What happened?" Nora asked, her voice trembling. "What's out there?" Eli didn't answer, just pulled her along, his flashlight cutting through the mist. "Keep the salt ready," he said, his voice tight. "It hates it, and don't look back, no matter what you hear." They ran, the forest a blur of shadow and fog, the Watcher's presence a weight at their backs. Nora's lungs burned, her legs screaming, but she didn't stop, didn't dare. Eli led her to a narrow path, the road barely visible through the trees. His truck was there, dented and mud-streaked, a beacon in the chaos. They scrambled inside, Eli slamming the door as he started the engine. The truck roared to life, tires spinning in the mud, and they lurched forward, the forest receding in the rearview mirror. Nora clutched the stone, her breath coming in sobs. "What was that thing?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the engine. Eli's hands were white on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. "Tisala Quay, the Watcher. It's been here longer than us, longer than anything. It feeds on what you bring, your fear, your pain. I tried to warn you." Nora thought of David, of the nightmares, the guilt she'd carried like a second skin. "It knew me," she whispered. "It knew everything." Eli glanced at her, his expression grim. "It always does. But you're out. That's what matters." The road widened, the trees thinning, and Nora felt a flicker of hope. But as they neared the edge of Blackthorn Woods, she looked in the side mirror and saw it. Tisala Quay, standing at the forest's edge, its red eyes glowing, its form still and unyielding. It didn't chase, didn't move, just watched, as if it knew something she didn't. They reached Haven by noon, the town's familiar streets a jarring contrast to the forest's nightmare. Eli parked outside the diner, his hands still trembling. "You're safe now," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Go home, Nora. Forget this place." Nora nodded, but the stone in her pocket felt heavier, the necklace tighter around her neck. She thanked Eli, her voice hollow, and drove back to Seattle, the miles blurring into a haze of exhaustion and fear. Weeks passed, and Nora tried to rebuild her life. She found a new apartment, a small studio with a view of the Puget Sound, and started therapy again, though she never mentioned Blackthorn Woods. The nightmares were different now. Not David, but the forest, the Watcher's eyes, the hum of her name. She kept the fire going in her apartment, even in the summer, the flames a ward against the shadows that seemed to follow her. One night, as she sat by the window, she found a woven circle of thorns and feathers on her doorstep, identical to the one from the cabin. Her heart stopped, the stone still in her drawer, seeming to pulse in time with her fear. She burned the circle, the flames hissing, and heard it again, faint but unmistakable. "Nora, you brought me home." She looked out the window, the city lights a fragile barrier against the dark. In the distance, under a street lamp, a tall, thin figure stood, its red eyes glowing, watching her. Nora closed the curtains, her hands shaking, and sat by the fire, the knife in her lap. Blackthorn Woods was gone. But Tasala Quay wasn't. It had followed her. Or maybe it had never let her go. She wrote in her notebook, "One last time." I thought I escaped. I was wrong. It's here, with me, always, and I don't know how to make it stop. The fire burned low, the city silent, and Nora waited, knowing the Watcher was out there, patient, eternal, waiting for her to answer its call.